You're doing all the work, you're following good advice, and nothing seems to be moving. You're not getting bookings, the visibility or the income that you expected. Your calendar's wide open. Other people seem to be on calls all the time, prospecting, and your calendar is, well, let's just say available. Or maybe you're getting some of it through, but not enough for it to feel real, for it to feel sustainable. There may be a ceiling somewhere above you that you can't quite identify, let alone break through it. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question is starting to form. Is this actually working? Or am I kidding myself? I've been in that place. I know what it feels like to follow the expert advice that doesn't seem to translate into your situation, to work so hard and still wonder, what am I missing? Today, I want to talk to you about what's probably really going on and how to reconnect with why you started this and what it really means if you do decide to stop. Welcome to Professional Speaking, the show for people who are serious about speaking and becoming known, booked, and paid. My name's John Ball, professional speaking coach, keynote speaker, stand-up comedian, and sci-fi nerd. I'm here as your guide on the journey to a successful speaking career. If you related to anything that I was saying there in that introduction, then there's a good chance that you've at least had some doubts about whether or not to continue with your business, whether you're ever going to make it, if there's something wrong with you that you just haven't been able to identify, why other people seem to be finding things so easy, but for you, it feels really hard. I can only relate to all of this. I had these experiences. I've been close to quitting on different projects and things so many times in my life. I got into coaching, started to wonder if I was ever going to make it as a coach, got into speaking, start to wonder those same things. Those feelings, it can end up feeling like you're in a race. And halfway through, you find that you're still near the starting line and nowhere near the finish. And the more you try to put effort in and find yourself not getting any closer to what seems like the finish line, not getting closer to your goals, to the finish line, the more frustrating it feels. The less you want to carry on, the more disheartened you become, and the more you start to question yourself. The old imposter syndrome kicks in. You're not seeing the results, and maybe you start thinking, well, maybe there's something wrong with me, that's why I'm not seeing it. Maybe people are avoiding me. You feel invisible despite all the genuine effort, spending hours maybe on social media, working on posts and content and articles and videos. Maybe you're getting some work, but it's not enough for it to feel real or sustainable for you. You're sensing a ceiling that you can't see clearly enough to push against and break through. The compounding effect of everything else life is throwing at you at the same time, because life doesn't pause whilst you're building your business. Now, the thing here is we can start to wonder if this is a motivation problem, because you will start to lose motivation, but really it's a visibility and timing problem wearing a motivational problem disguise, because it more than likely is not that. And so it becomes a thing of something I've talked about a bunch on the show recently, and we'll be going into more detail on in the future, of positioning and relevance being a large part of this. There are people out there who will tell you that all you need to do is to improve your storytelling skills, or you need to increase your stage presence, and that's going to get you more speaking gigs. You need to be more interactive with the audience. You need to sell the workshops more. Yeah, these are all good things. Definitely you should do them. Improve your talk, all of that good stuff. And yet, they are probably not the thing that's going to make the biggest difference for you. And I don't think I could emphasize this enough, that where the fix needs to happen if you're not getting the business is in the business side of things, far less than the performance side, because the chances are your performance, the ability when you actually show up, when you do your job, you're probably pretty good at it. I'm willing to bet that you're good at what you do. You probably somewhere deep down inside know that you are. And your clients probably like you. Your audiences probably enjoy your talks. And so all the elements will seem to be right. Yeah, okay. There are probably things that could be improved upon, because there always will be, and you're never going to be perfect. But to think that the result is just that you need to be more energized and emotional about this idea that you just need to live in the energy of the goal achieved, is like, this sounds great. It sounds very self-help, but it's hard to do, especially when the results aren't coming through. But rather than thinking that mindset is going to be the thing that fixes it here, it's going to be much more practical elements that will make the bigger difference. Whatever you do is going to have a results lag. So there's always going to be a lag in seeing the results from your efforts, nearly every time. The work that you're doing now rarely produces results now. There's going to be some kind of delay. And the delay is long enough to feel like a failure when it isn't. The pipeline that you're building today will pay out later. The relationships that you're developing now will pay off later in the future. That is not consolidation. It's how the mechanics of this actually work. The one thing I can say is I can probably use this podcast as a great example of that, because there have been many times I also think, well, I'm not really sure it's growing enough to be worthwhile. I mean, what am I doing with the show? What's it leading to? Why do I keep doing it? And am I going to keep it going, given that it's not actually generating the results that I'd hoped for? The reality is this: I know that shows like this are a very slow burn. I know that they serve specific audiences. I know that those audiences tend to be pretty loyal and come back, and that it's hard work growing a show. My take on it has really become more of this. When I thought about giving up the show, that upset me. I thought, could I actually stop if I wanted to? Yeah, I could, but I would miss it. I would miss the people that I get to talk to, the network that I've been building up since I started doing this show. I would miss the people who have been helped as a result of some of the content and effort we've been putting out there. That's the stuff that I would miss. The positioning that this gives me is that a source of we get to know each other a bit. Okay, it's a bit of a one-way street right now for the most part, but you get to know more about me and what I'm about and who I am. There's few things like this for trust building, or what my friend Taki Moore calls brand width, to be able to get and understand more of a person's content and who they are and whether they're someone you'd want to work with. So that was ultimately what I ended up coming back to is, why am I doing this? And is it okay to keep going and putting in the level of energy and effort into this if it's not developing the results that I really would hope and maybe even need to see from this? It did lead me to making some decisions about how much time I would spend on the podcast and on editing and outputs and all those kinds of things, and promotional side as well, which is unfortunate because those are important elements of the podcast. But for the moment, at least, these are not things that are actively bringing in money into my business. And I'll be honest about that. I wish there were. I wouldn't say the podcast never have. It certainly has at various times through sponsorships, sometimes through being a funnel for clients to come through to me as well. But if I was only going to do this because I want to be seeing at least 3-5 leads coming through a week from the show, for it to be worthwhile for me to continue doing it, I would actually have stopped doing the show, because that isn't where things are at right now. And yet here I am still doing it because I think it's valuable. It helps me, I think, and I hope it helps you as well as a listener. Now, look, the advice that you get from particular gurus may not be wrong. It just may not be right for where you are yet. Here's an example from me. One time I was told, you just need to start live streaming on LinkedIn every day and you will build audience. I started doing that. I did it for, I'd say, 60 days, and I saw nothing, like maybe a handful at the most of people who were tuning in. And whilst there were things going on that I was like, maybe it wasn't specific enough about, there's all sorts of things I can look back on and say why that didn't work out for me. But ultimately, it wasn't the best advice for where I was, because my messaging, my product, if you like, wasn't clear enough for anyone to be like, all right, I should be tuning into this guy and what he's talking about. I had to figure that stuff out. Now, I got some really great experience at doing live streams, which has been very helpful to me. It was 60 days of doing them. I was able to get a bit better at riffing about things and consistency and all those important elements, but it didn't move the needle for me professionally. And so whilst it's nice to learn and develop, it doesn't put money into the bank. It doesn't pay your rent or your mortgage. So look, a lot of people are following advice that would be right for somebody who's already got an established platform or a warm audience or a different market, and it doesn't automatically transfer. Or they're trying to do stuff that they're seeing other people who are really much further ahead than they are in their business doing. And it's not right for them. They don't have the foundational elements. And certainly this has been very real for me in life and business, of trying to jump to those higher levels of activity, of action, the stuff that looks really fun and high level, without any of the foundational elements underneath it supporting it that do actually need to be there. We would love to think that we could get to skip the foundations, but we don't. There'll always be exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, we actually need to build a business foundationally as a business, and not just be out there doing the high level social media marketing or just getting up on the stage and speaking. These are not the things that actually will get you the longer term results. They are the things that will work better for the people who are already established. So the advice you may be getting might be calibrated for somebody further down the road, or perhaps on a different road entirely. And if it's just not translating for you, like one example would be, for me personally, I was in growing my coaching business, was given the advice of, and I'm going into Facebook and going to these groups and direct messaging people on Facebook. This is before it became much more common practice, but I felt uneasy about it. I felt it was a bit sleazy and cheesy. I had some very negative responses to that from people that I was reaching out to who did start conversations, but they weren't nice conversations to be having. And I also had a lot of people ignore me or block me. And even when I did start to have some good conversations coming from that, it didn't feel like there was enough of them to outweigh the sleaziness of it. It just didn't feel right for me. And so I stopped doing it because I didn't like feeling like a sleazy marketer. And that's what I felt like. And I don't like it when other people, I don't like it when people now just connect with me on LinkedIn and the first message from them is trying to sell me their shit, or that they don't even go that far. They're just directly emailing my inbox with their products or services. I don't think any of us like that. There's no relationship. There's no trust there. There's really just that feeling of all you care about is getting a sale. And this is probably not the best way to do it. There's a frank reality that we may also be measuring the wrong things. Very, very often we look at vanity metrics rather than the real leading indicators. That's if we even look at metrics at all, because I certainly know speakers, coaches, workshop leaders who do not look at the numbers, who do not track their progress, some of them don't even have CRM, any system of being able to follow up with people or keeping on track with things. How can you really expect a business to work if you're not doing the business itself? You just want to show up and deliver the product. That is not how this is going to work out for you. Very occasionally, some people, either through the positioning or through the relationships that they already have, or through money or status that they already have, do get pulled into just delivering the product, and someone else or company takes care of all those other bits. Don't expect that for yourself. It's probably not going to happen. It's, again, the exception rather than the rule. So if you're aiming just to be visible, if you're like one of the pick me people, or see, look at me, here I am over here on social media doing something weird or wacky or crazy, or pay attention to me, or look, I've got my AI generated carousel over here, or this post template that I've copied from someone else's successful post, and I'm putting it all over social media and I'm not seeing any responses, or I'm commenting on other people's posts, but they're not really commenting back, or putting up regular images and posts, but is not really tracking. Well, something's not connecting. Because if I was just look at downloads as my only podcast metric, probably not going to be super excited about that anytime soon. But that doesn't reflect whether someone has listened to the episode and got something really helpful from it. It doesn't reflect relationships that have been built up through the conversations that we've been having. It's only one metric, and it's not really the truest generator of success. So you may look and see no results, but that might not actually be true. And look, if you're on LinkedIn, which a lot of professional coaches and speakers are, if you're on LinkedIn, there's a chance that a lot of people are not directly responding to what you do anyway, because people tend to be more passive observers on LinkedIn. They often don't seem to join in the chats that much. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. So it very much depends. It's unlikely that the reason that you're not as far ahead as you would like to be is because of you personally as a person. because there are always going to be things that you could be better about, things that you'll probably be able to improve on, and you will continue to improve on over time. But the problem is almost certainly adjustable. The question is whether you have given it enough runway to know that yet. So go back to your why. Why are you doing this in the first place? What got you into it? And don't look for a polished answer here. This isn't something that you're going to be saying to someone as a networker. And this is time to get real with yourself. If you're having doubts, real doubts about continuing with the business that you've been putting time and energy into, then it's time to have a think about why you are doing this. What really matters about this for you? Because if it was just the money, there's a million other things that you could do to make money that might be a lot easier and may even require far less of you putting yourself in front of other people. But the why is going to do two things here. First, it's going to tell you whether the problem is worth solving. Because if your why is still solid, the conversation is going to shift a bit from, well, should I continue with this, to what needs to change? Those are very different questions with very different answers. Secondly, it reconnects you with what you are actually doing this for, which is rarely just for bookings or income. It's usually about impact or identity or something you need to say or just a desire to make a difference. When you're in the fog of slow results, it's easy to lose sight of that and measure everything against the wrong standard. Most of the people that I encounter in the speaking and coaching world are in it because they are compassionate people, because they actually genuinely care. They want to make a difference. They want to help other people. They didn't get into it just because they thought, oh, wow, there's a lot of money to be made here. There are people who come into the industry who are like that, completely cynical, just want money. And those people exist, but they are few and far between. The vast majority of people in the speaking and coaching world are much more about purpose, much more about connection, pretty real people who would do it for free if they could, if they didn't need the money. They're still going to do it. So it doesn't need to be long. Your purpose for your business is really whatever you decide you want it to be. What gives you fulfillment in doing this? What makes this worthwhile for you in the long run? That hopefully the income side of it is more a perk, a bonus, a great bonus to have rather than anything else. If you're at that point where you just think, look, this has been long enough already. Things aren't happening. Maybe you feel like you've run out of runway and it might just be a practical reality for you. That's not a verdict on who you are. I've had this situation where I had money from a redundancy and that was my money to start up a business. And after 12 months, wasn't where I needed to be. And I had to go and get a job to be able to pay my rent, to be able to keep going. That was the reality of it for me. It wasn't the end of the dream, even though at the time I thought it was. I thought everything was falling apart. Stopping because the finances demand it or because life has changed isn't the same thing as being wrong or having started. In fact, what it can end up doing is being a fresh start for you. There may be new opportunities or connections to still be had. It might even just mean that you need to work a bit harder for a while. I ended up building up my coaching business around the job that I took. It took a lot of extra work. It took months of commitment and dedication. And I was tired. But it was a season of hustle. It wasn't a forever hustle. And it was worth it because it got me off the ground. It got me to a point where I could quit that job and go full time with my coaching. And the whole series of events made me more serious about what I was doing. Look back and think maybe it had to work out that way. It's okay. It wasn't the end of everything. So there's a difference between quitting the dream rather than pausing the pursuit. If you run out of resources, you can be look, some people make it in the business because they don't need to make money for themselves. They've got maybe somebody else supporting behind the scenes, or they've got family money, or they just don't need to be making money for whatever reason. Maybe they've made their fortune. And so they're not really worried about making more fortune right now. So they don't have that fear of, well, I'm going to run out of runway, I'm going to run out of resources at some point that you and I and others may have. And that can be very real reason for not taking action. Don't be jealous of that. It's like everyone has their own positions and we all have our own privileges and lack thereof. And sometimes the problem can be that sometimes from the outside, everyone kind of looks the same in the same position, but we're not. We all have different things going on. Sometimes we're perhaps even not as resourceful with the resources that we have as we could be, or we don't actually get so resourceful about things that actually aren't affected or run by how much money we have in the bank. Those are very different ways of looking for it. But for a very small number of people where all the signals are genuinely pointing in one direction, nothing is connecting, nothing seems adjustable, the why is genuinely gone, or feels hollow, it doesn't feel real. I didn't think exploring other options would be failure. It would be honesty. And that was the way to look at it, because most people who are asking the question usually are asking it too early. And if you are wondering whether to quit, that wondering in itself is worth examining. People who have genuinely reached the end usually know it without needing a podcast episode like this to confirm it for them. If it's the case, make the cut, make the decision, and move on to other things. Here's what I'll say. If you realize next week that you've made the wrong decision, it's all still there for you to come back to, But if you end up finding yourself on a much easier path with opportunities that start opening up to you because you've made that decision and opening other doors, then that's a pretty good sign that you're actually moving in a better direction. Nobody wants to be banging their head against a brick wall for a long time and not seeing results based on that. But there is always the chance that you may be closer than you think to the outcomes that you really want. Not because that's a comfortable or motivational thing to say, but because sometimes the gap between invisible and known is shorter than it appears to be from inside the fog. The problem is you can't see it from where you are. So what you can do to help you get clear on why you're here, adjust what is adjustable. Take an honest look at whether you really are working the business side of your business effectively, because that probably is where things most need to be happening. And that you're not just hoping, not just doing stuff that you hope will get results, but you're doing stuff that you actually know. If you do this, you will see results. You will see things happening. Business has levers that generally work, and they shouldn't be levers that you hope that when you push the button and pull the lever, that things start to run. Hope is an important thing to have with you, but it is not in itself a strategy. It's not going to get you results. You need to be doing things that you know will or should get you results. And probably if you're looking to learn that from someone else, looking for things that you can get from them that are pretty much like, you do this with me and you will get this. Because if you don't, we'll give you your money back. And you should be then following through and taking the action. Sometimes I see this as well, that some people are taking the action, but not getting the level of feedback that they need to be on the kinds of action they're taking to be able to know whether they should keep doing more of this or do some of that. And that's a really useful thing to have. This is why coaches and guides can be so helpful for you as you're growing your business as well. And most people could do with having some sort of advisor, mentor, coach who can help them see more clearly what's really going on. And to be able to say, all right, well, hopefully if you have, for speaking particularly, if the stuff that you're doing to get results isn't working and you don't know why, it's going to be an external view on what you do that's going to be able to more clearly see what's really going on, where things are and aren't working or connecting, and perhaps where you're spending time that isn't being effective for you and where you should be spending time that's going to get you bigger results, more bang for your buck. I hope it's been helpful. If you are genuinely thinking, I just feel like I'm banging my head against the brick wall, I don't see what the problem is, get in touch. Let's take a look at things. Let's go through it and see if we can figure out what's really going on for you. If you're close to quitting and you just think, you know what, maybe this is the last ditch attempt, let's have a chat. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn or directly email me, john@presentinfluence.com. For now, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, have an amazing rest of your day. Go and do something worth talking about. We'll see you next time.